If you are trying to improve or change anything about yourself, your habits, your behaviors, or anything else about your life, it can feel really daunting when you consider the gap between where you are and where you would like to be. But there is a certain perspective that, if you embraced it, would make the process of personal change a lot less daunting. It might even make it fun. It could even help you think about ways to gamify the change process. Hi, my name is Aretha, and in today's video, let's talk about how to make personal change easier to accomplish. The first idea you need to internalize is that you cannot hold your current identity too closely. This is where we need to consider the growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. I have another video that talks about the illusion of permanence and how to embrace change. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go check it out. Basically, what it boils down to is that you have to believe that change is possible and that change is positive, especially when you initiate it. Your previous identity is rooted in your previous environments. If we took you with your personality traits and all of that and put you in a different environment, you would become a different person, a slightly different version of yourself. A very easy example to grasp is that my identity before I moved to the United States was very different than my identity now. And it's not because I chose to become a different person, but I just live my life differently because I'm in a completely different environment. Add to that the fact that when I still lived in Benin, I was a teenager, and then when I moved to the United States, I became an adult with a bunch of responsibilities. The realities of the things I have to do and how I have to behave have changed. And while the core of who I am remains mostly the same, I am a different version of the same person. Another great example is with driving. Depending on where you live in the United States, you may consider yourself a driver because that's the reality of where you live. In other places of the US, you might be more likely to use public transport. And in that case, you may not identify as a driver because you never needed to drive. So it's a small example, but it shows how, depending on where you choose to place yourself, you can embody different variations of you. The second idea I want you to embrace is that you can reverse engineer what you want. And here I'd like to make the distinction between two different types of change. So the first type is when it's very small in scope and it's clear. So for example, if you're always running late, maybe you want to become a person who wakes up an hour earlier. That's very finite, it's clear, it's defined, and you can probably figure out the steps to do that. You need to go to bed earlier, you need to set up your alarm for an hour earlier, and you may need to look at shortening your morning routine so you can leave on time. Those are clear steps. It doesn't mean that the process will be easy, but it makes it simple to understand. The second type of change is when you are not really clear on what specific things need to happen. In my experience, this happens when you are dissatisfied with your current state, and maybe there's someone out there that reflects to you what could be possible. In those circumstances, I tend to label myself broadly and say, oh, I'm just not put together, or I'm just not attractive enough, or I'm just not smart enough. And in contrast, there's someone out there that I think, oh my God, she has it all put together, or he's so brilliant and always well spoken, or whatever it may be. So what you do is paint yourself with a really broad brush of negativity, and then you paint someone else with the perfect brush of like being on top of everything. What I would like to recommend is that if you have someone out there that inspires you, that you feel drawn to, take the time to investigate what specific things about them make them appear perfect to you. Because let's face it, no one is perfect. The idea that someone else has it all figured out and that they just naturally wake up and everything just falls into place for them is not true, and it's not helpful. Usually, if there's someone out there that looks like they have it all together, you can identify behaviors and choices that they're making that helps them come off that way. So let's take the example that I think a lot of us can relate to. When you feel frumpy and you feel like you're a hot mess, because that's a popular thing that we like to say out there about ourselves. And then in contrast, there's the person who seems so put together. Well, if you break down what about them makes you feel like they are on top of things, you may find that this person seems like they're always put together because they're never late to meetings. They're never frazzled. They never show up late or running around trying to pull themselves together at the last minute. So if you break down that behavior, you may find that what you need to do is learn to show up 10 minutes early. And maybe this person shows up, is always on time and has their hair put together and they have a cup of coffee, which indicates that not only were they on time, but they also had the time to go get coffee on their way to where they were going. So there's like a lot of nuances to what about them makes them look like they're on top of things. And if that's the case, you can break that down and decide, okay, the 3 behaviors I need to start working on is how to get places earlier, how to make sure every time I go somewhere, my hair is done. I mean, you can build that into your schedule, into your routine. And then maybe showing up with a cup of coffee symbolically represents that someone had so much time that they not only got ready and looked their best, but they even had time to go get themselves a cup of coffee. So maybe you start going places with your own cup of coffee. You may have to make it at home, but the specific elements that to you indicate success are the elements you want to start adding to your life so that you can upgrade how you see yourself. Because chances are you are not really a hot mess. We all have a behind the scenes that no one else sees, and we are all a hot mess behind the scenes. But how we show up in the end really is how we are perceived. So maybe you can break down what someone else that seems to be on top of everything, what they are doing to seem like that, and you can start working on that. So anytime you feel like you would like to change, but you don't have a clear direction, or you feel like there must be some kind of magic formula out there, usually there isn't. Usually it's a series of steps that someone else has taken, and maybe they've done it for so long that it's become second nature to them, but you can learn how to do it. If you've ever worked in a customer service job, you know that is how change happens. So anytime you start working somewhere new, you have to learn how to answer the phone. You have to learn how to say, hey, welcome to company X, Y, and Z. My name is so-and-so. This is how I can help you today, or whatever. There's a script. So when you first start working at the company, that script feels very uncomfortable. So you may have to write it down, you may have to rehearse it, you may have to fumble the first few times you answer the phone until you get it right. But then it becomes second nature. It's just how you answer the phone. And chances are when you leave that job, you will have to unlearn answering the phone that way because it'll become second nature and you'll do it just by default. Similarly, the changes you're trying to make in your life seem daunting at first, but all it takes is repetition until you just do them and they become part of your identity. So this takes me to the third idea. You need to build evidence of what you want. So if your brain doesn't believe that you're the kind of person who can wake up an hour early, you have to start giving it evidence that you are in fact someone who can wake up earlier. Because your brain will rely on its previous version of you, and every time you tell it, okay, I can wake up at 5 a.m. instead of 6, your brain will say, no, you can't. We've never done that. You probably can't. But the truth is, there's no magic to it. You can wake up at 5 a.m. if you train yourself to. So what you need to do to overwrite your brain's programming is to give it evidence of this new behavior. So the more you do it, the more you practice it, the more likely your brain is to take it in and accept that that's part of who you are, because your brain thinks of your identity in terms of your repeated behavior. James Clear famously talks about how every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. It's a very similar concept. You're building evidence for yourself of the new person you are becoming. If you believe I'm always late, I'm someone who's always late, when you start showing up on time, which is doable, the more you do that, the more you build evidence that you're the kind of person who can show up on time. And over time, that overrides your sense of identity and you start becoming a person who's never late. So what you think about yourself right now is not an absolute truth. It's just based on your past experiences and the evidence you have amassed over time. So to change your sense of who you are, you have to just build new evidence. And this is where I think gamification could be a fun way to do that. If you use a habit tracker, don't just check things off because, oh, I gotta do this 30 days in a row. Actually look at every check mark as another piece of evidence towards where you're trying to go. So keeping track of things and putting a check mark is a fun way to gamify the process of changing. At some point, you'll no longer have to put tick marks because it'll just become something you do. The fourth idea to make change easier is that at some point, you have to assume the new label. You have to embrace the new identity. And here's what I mean by that. If you go and exercise regularly for a period of time, you need to start calling yourself someone who is fit, or you need to call yourself someone who is active. If you started to show up to your meetings on time, and feeling prepared and feeling on top of things, then you need to stop thinking about yourself and referring to yourself as a hot mess. At some point, you need to just shed that identity and, based on the evidence you've collected, embrace the fact that no, you are someone who is put together. It's important to note that the process of building evidence is not to prove anything to anybody else. It's to convince your own brain and to get on board with yourself about the new identity that you are trying to adopt. So we're collecting evidence so that it's easier for ourselves to believe that we can become who we want to be. It's not about other people noticing and giving you the label that you want. You don't need anyone's approval. You get to assign the label to yourself once you're confident enough through building evidence that you are capable of doing this thing. You have always been capable of it, but it takes a little bit of catching up and rewiring of our natural tendencies to embrace the new version of ourselves that we're building along the way. And this makes me think of something Laura Vanderkam said in one of her podcasts. If you do something 3 times a week, you can assign yourself that identity. And she says you may not be able to have dinner together as a family every day of the week, but if you're able to do it 3 times a week, you can say we are a family that has dinner together. Similarly, you don't have to exercise 7 days a week to call yourself someone who's active and exercises regularly. If you're able to do it at least 3 times a week, it's often enough for you to call it part of your identity. And I love that idea. We don't want to have all or nothing thinking when it comes to our habits. If you do it enough that it's regular and it's part of your typical behavior, then that becomes part of your identity. Personal change can be a much more fun and easier process than we typically make it. If you truly believe that you can change and you start practicing behavior and building evidence of this new identity, soon you'll be able to claim to be this new version of yourself. And the great thing is you can go through this process as many times as you want. So the world is your oyster. What new identity are you trying on next? If you like this video, remember to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments how you feel about personal change.